My mum and dad were both from very humble backgrounds. People listening to this might think, oh, she was a privileged expatriate. But my parents were quite tough on us.
On the show today, we have the Vice President of Food and Beverage, Strategy and Development for Europe, Middle East and Africa. One and only Emma Banks with us.
Everybody is struggling to achieve gender balance in their kitchens.
As you know, here on the Chef JKP Podcast, we love to push boundaries and discover the people who have made a big impact within the hospitality industry. The guest on this week's show is making a monumental difference when it comes to the food and beverage landscape across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. You are about to hear an interview from one of the most respected operators in the business. On the podcast this week, I talked to the formidable Emma Banks. We discuss her journey of growing up in Asia, her love of food from the hawker stalls, to then working as a waitress at the age of 11, to then management training in the north of England, to now her job within the Hilton brand. Emma is quite a prominent figure in the industry. In this interview, she really opens up about how she learnt how to be resilient and how various experiences in her life have shaped the way she runs the business. Emma is a powerhouse of the industry. This is a really fantastic conversation, so make yourself comfortable and get strapped in. Now, at the end of the quick fire round, listen to the story about uniform and trousers. Time to rock and roll.
Hi, I'm Emma Banks. I'm the Vice President of Food and Beverage Development and Strategy, Hilton EMEA. If you like the podcast, make sure to follow, share, and subscribe.
Welcome back to the Chef JKP Podcast. And on the show today, we have the one and only Emma Banks with us. She is the Vice President of Food and Beverage, Strategy and Development for Europe, Middle East and Africa. Emma, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Sorry. Hello. I was just going to say at Hilton as well.
At Hilton?
We missed that bit, yeah.
So first things first, I want to talk about your childhood food memory. So can you tell me your first or favourite childhood food memory?
Well, some of your listeners may know this, but I was born and raised in Asia. I was born in Malacca. I lived on very remote plantations, which meant I had to go to boarding school at a very early age. But I grew up very immersed in the local cuisine because it's what the ladies and gentlemen that used to help us on the plantations in the big houses, plantation houses, used to cook. I was fluent in Bahasa Melayu because that's how I used to speak to all the team that worked in the house. And I used to eat lots of local food. So, you know, I then became very well versed in just eating off the hawker stalls on the streets, but not in tourist places, just in small little kampongs in Malaysia. So I would think nothing of just going up and ordering like local dried salted prunes, you know, asams, and eat them as sweets. Or the satay man used to come round once a week. That was our treat, and put up his barrel and his coal and cook satays in our garden. And he was just a local man from the local village, from the local kampong. I used to love gula melaka, you know. I used to love ikan mole. I used to go, because we lived so remotely on the plantations. It was a time when Malaysia didn't have, like Sepang, we lived in Sepang, it has a Formula One track, but it used to take us 3 hours to commute from Kuala Lumpur to Sepang, and we used to have to go on what was called Tanah Merah Dock, which is like Red Dust Road on Land Rover to finally get to the estate. So we used to go to local markets with my mum and the ladies that helped us, and I would think nothing of coming back from the market with live produce, with chickens, and then I would go and sit on a little 3-legged stool out the back of the bungalow, which would be on stilts for security, and sit under the bungalow in the shade with my armour, chatting away, annoying her, and she'd literally be killing the chickens and I'd be just chatting away and talking about what curry we were going to have.
But I think that's really amazing.
Yeah.
What an amazing education to be, to have that world.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant.
I love Southeast Asian food. That triangle of Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. That's my favourite food because that's what I grew up. It was a real treat for us to go to Port Dickson and go and sit on the Port Dickson in Selangor and sit on the side of the port and just eat in the hawker stalls of fish and crabs and everything coming in on the port. And the restaurant manager, my dad would sit there and, they would look after us because we were good customers. And, they would run to the boats and they would just say to my father, Tuan, what do you want? And he would tell them crabs or something and they'd run and you could see them running up and down the boats, sort of arguing with the fishermen and picking the best things and then bringing them to the restaurant. And we lived a very remote life, kind of a lonely life. It was just my sister and I. We didn't see kids very much. There was no running around, which is why we went to boarding school so young, because we had to socialise. My social circle was my mum, my dad, and the team that worked and supported us in a big plantation building, bungalow, which was home.
But your palate must have been, so honed in.
Well, I think I destroyed my palate because I love chilies, and I used to have raw chopped chilies with everything, like everything.
As a child?
Yeah. I thought nothing, anything I ate, which wasn't very healthy now if I look back, but my breakfast, I always had soya sauce with everything. I used to love green chopped chilies and just put a bit of soya sauce in them and just constantly pop them in my mouth with whatever I was eating.
So during your adolescent years, was it the same types of food that you would have growing up?
Well, when I went to my first boarding school was in Penang. It was I went just literally before I turned 6, and it was up Penang Hill, and it was very remote. I mean, you couldn't get there by car. You had to go on one of those little perpendicular monorails, and then at the top of the hill, gentlemen would carry your school trunk because it was about a 2-mile walk, and it was a big old building, literally on the top of a hill, surrounded by jungle. It was that remote, and we ate a combination of local food, but they also sort of cooked traditional British food because it was an English boarding school. So, there was botched toad in the hole and botched bread and butter pudding. And, I think I used to enjoy the local food a lot more because I think my palate was so honed in on it, but also they just cooked it better because it was their indigenous food to cook. So, when they were told to cook Sunday roast, I was always happy when it was Sunday curry because curry lunches was a big thing.
Right, okay.
People would travel miles from other plantations. It was kind of the one social occasion on a Sunday because it was the day off for everybody to get together for curry lunch. It was my favourite because there were these big, massive buffets of curry lunch. And, I used to love ikan bilis. Oh, ikan bilis is the little, I forget what you call it, anchovies, the deep fried anchovies. That's a delicacy in that part of the world. That was like my crisps.
How amazing to have that at such a young age, to have so many adventures, not just within food, but also, with this perpendicular little train going up the hill and seeing all of that. It must have been quite amazing.
And then we moved, I think, by when I was about 9 or 10. Last few years have been at that school before coming to the UK for boarding school. They moved down the hill into main Georgetown, as people would know in Penang, and we would be allowed to go on walks sometimes, escorted, and we would just buy, because in boarding school, you know what it's like. Well, maybe people don't know what it's like, but to go out and get tuck or treats is such a treat. So our tuck would be going out and buying food off the hawkers' stalls, so buying the sweets off the hawkers' stalls, or so kind of that's. So I grew up very much indoctrinated in Southeast Asian cuisine, and really authentic.
Yeah, super
because,
authentic. I was going to say
we used to eat out at the kampongs, and the people that cooked for us, cooked their home food.
So then, if we move into your higher education, where were you in the world when you started doing degrees and that sort of thing?
Right. Well, my parents sent me to boarding school in the UK to North Wales, to a girls' school called Penrose College in Colwyn Bay, Ross-on-Sea. So, and my parents were from the north of England. My father was from Yorkshire. My mum was from Liverpool. But because my father was an expatriate, he went in the Merchant Navy and then he worked in Asia. My father worked all his life as an expatriate, pretty much. And they had really very little family. So they kind of, when they came on what we called leave from people in Dubai, people go home in the summer, they would have leave every 18 months, I think, for 3 months. They would always stay in North Wales because they just loved it. And they decided to send my sister and I to boarding school there. So I went to boarding school in North Wales, very fortunate, on the coast, beautiful place. Snowdonia as well. We used to have outdoor activities near Snowdonia. And then I went to university campus in York. I actually went to, it was part of University of Leeds, but the campus was in York. It was a college that had been acquired by the university. So my degree is from the University of Leeds, but I was actually fortunate to study in York. So I had a great few years in York where I got my degree, but actually I think I enjoyed my student life and actually worked in hospitality more than I studied.
But what did you study, Emma?
Gosh, I was really ahead of the trend then. Can you believe it? I actually I started my major in media studies and minored in English literature.
Wow.
And then in my third year, I flipped it and majored in English literature and did media studies.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I was actually doing media studies right back in the late 80s, early 90s. At that time, everybody was like, what a joke. Media studies.
What does it mean, media studies, right?
Exactly. So
and so during your time at university,
it was probably a little bit too advanced because I think
it was at the time.
Yeah, because I never actually went on to use it because I didn't necessarily. I should have maybe done it because I think I would have been pretty good at it. But I didn't go into journalism, it was kind of like it was either go into TV. Or journalism, and I didn't really have access to that because at that time you really needed connections to get into that industry. You needed the right family and the right connections, and I didn't have any of that. So, but it was, I look back now and think, gosh, what drew me to that?
But during your time there, you said you started working within hospitality.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So what were the sort of jobs that you got sort of stuck into?
Yeah. Well, I actually wanted to, when I was reflecting on some of the things we'd talk about, I wanted to talk about how I started in hospitality. And of course, I'm a Gen X, so I'm probably a little bit older than some of the people you have on here. So I talked about those summer holidays when my parents would come home for 3 months. And my mum and dad were both from very humble backgrounds. I mean, my father didn't have school shoes. So, they brought me up kind of quite salt of the earth. I didn't have a sort of, people listening to this might think, oh, she was a privileged expatriate, because they've got perceptions of what it might be to be an expatriate child. But my parents, were quite tough on us. And boarding school was tough on us. Boarding school then was quite tough, actually. So we had to earn our pocket money. And it wasn't very much. And I was kind of like, I liked things. So at 11, I proceeded to apply in the newspaper, as you did to jobs at the time, for a waitress. And I got a waitress job at 11 years old, because the law to employ under 16-year-old, for people to start working in the UK at 16 hadn't come in then. So I got a summer job working in a cafe in Llandudno. So if anybody knows, listening, Llandudno is like a seaside resort in North Wales, and it has a lot of day trippers, and mostly a lot of elderly people come on a coach, and they have a lovely day out at the beach, and they maybe go back to Merseyside or whatever. And I worked in this place. I'll name it because it's long closed and sold. I don't even think it's a restaurant anymore, called the Cambridge Grill. And it was kind of like your typical seaside cafe. And people would come in for fish and chips and peas, or pie and peas, bread and butter, And it was mostly old dears, and they would leave you 5 or 10 pence tip or whatever. But it was non-stop. It was brutal. And, I had to wear like a little black skirt, doily on my head, little white blouse, little white frilly apron. It was a typical like little English seaside cafe. But the thing I always remember about it was this woman was so strict, the woman that ran it, right? And she was like super mean, and controlled us all. And, it probably wouldn't be allowed now. I mean, we worked so hard. But the thing I remember most was at the end of the day, it had a carpet, and she refused to buy us a vacuum hoover, a vacuum cleaner. So at the end of the day, we used to all have to get on our knees in our sections with a dustpan and brush and sweep it. And can you imagine all the chips and peas and crumbs and everything?
My word.
Anyway, so that was my first job in hospitality, but I stuck it out. So I think that's what, I had resilience. I'd gone to boarding school sub-6 and, coped with that. I'd coped with a travel. I think my first international flight was at 3 months, and I was used to traveling. And I stuck at this job. I didn't give it in. And at the end of the summer, I had this jar full of all this silver coinage, the tips from all the old dears, God bless them. And I counted it all, and it came to like just over £60, which at the time was a monumental amount of money, especially in my little
world.
For
11 years old.
And at that time, we're talking a long time ago. And I was an avid tennis player at school. So I actually went out and bought the Andre Agassi tennis racket. It was called an Arthur Ashe, and it was in aluminium, and it was the one Andre Agassi was promoting. And I was like the kid that went back to school with and everybody still had the wooden rackets.
And you were like, yeah.
And that was the power of hard work.
Wow.
And anyway, every summer after that, when I was around, I went on to have jobs. But to get back to, I worked in lots of cafes. As soon as I was legal, I worked in bars. But at university, I held down 3 jobs. I worked in a cocktail bar upstairs of a restaurant, a really cool restaurant, and I ran the cocktail bar, which was a good gig, actually, because it was a small, cosy restaurant cocktail bar. So, it was kind of pre and post diners, so it wasn't too challenging. I worked in a cafe, which was pretty much like my first job, day trippers into York. It was Friday, Saturday. Yeah, I worked in a cafe, but I also worked in the Railway Men's Working Club's pub as well.
Right.
And I served a lot of pints, and I got to know more about railway timetables than I ever care to imagine, because often I'd be there on duty on a Tuesday night, and I would just be the one person that would be speaking to a train driver about where he'd driven and the timetable. So,
Blimey.
But it funded me through university. And then I kind of got some jobs on the graduate milk round, not in hospitality. But then I fell into, I actually saw a role, again, advertised in the paper, because they still advertised jobs in the paper at that time, to work for a company called Allied Domecq Leisure, and it sounded like a really exciting job. And it was to become an area manager in a restaurant and pub group. And I took that and got that and never looked back. I've always stayed in hospitality and in restaurants and bars since then.
But I mean, I think, just to put it into context, quite a phenomenal journey from a very, very young age regarding your palate adventures, training, education, working at the age of 11, which is amazing. It's a record. I started at 13, but I think the thing is, it sounds really tough, right? As in, but you chose to go to work at that age. You applied for that job.
Oh, yeah, I wanted the money.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So it must have taught you
a lot
of responsibility.
Yeah, I wanted to get a tennis racket.
Yeah,
I didn't realise I was going to get a top-end one, though. I mean, it was like, I want a new tennis racket. And it was like, well,
but
get the money.
Inadvertently, it also must have taught you so much about people skills.
Oh, yes.
How to manage different people. I mean, so many things that you would have never really been taught at school.
Well, I learned a lot at school because, remember, I used to go to school and say bye to mum and dad, and, it was 6 weeks before I saw them again. And this is in a time when I couldn't pick up a phone to them.
Yeah.
Well, we were in Asia.
Yes.
And it was quite difficult to, phone lines were not lit. It wasn't like the broadband that people are used to now. We didn't have internet. I would write home once a week. We had a letter writing home, and we all had to take our letters up to the teacher, and all the kids that were crying, going, "Oh, I hate it here. Please come and get me." Go away, rewrite your letters. But right. Mine was always like, I had this for dinner. I had that for dinner. I saw a stray cat and brought it back to school, and the headmistress was very mad with me because Asia is also a place when I was at boarding school where I started to realise that I liked going out and picking up stray animals, which is why I have 8 rescue animals here in Dubai with me now. That my love of animals and rescuing strays has never gone away. But yeah, I learnt resilience early on, I think, because I was away from mum and dad and the life I'd known, this remote life, plus, I lived, I suppose I was a third culture kid before it even became trendy, I lived in a place where, I lived amongst lots of different cultures and nationalities. I ate a really eclectic mix of food. I saw a different life. I thought nothing of going and playing in our garden and in snake season being told to always take a golf club with me, and if I'd see a snake, just whack it. And I did that many times because, if you wanted to play in the garden in snake season, you needed a golf club, and I whacked a few snakes. I don't know if I ever killed any, but it got rid of them, and I carried on playing.
I love it.
I stepped out of bed once on a scorpion and my foot swelled to the size of a balloon, and had to be rushed to hospital, So I think I learnt resilience early on through life. And then, of course, working in summer jobs and hospitality and, yeah. And you're right. You learn a lot about people in hospitality. So, and even in my first professional jobs in hospitality, I worked in pubs in northern UK towns, and it's her from the brewery. And I used to be like, I'm not from the brewery, I'm from the management company. But of course, that meant nothing to customers. But, I spoke to customers all the time because my job, I got to know all the regulars in the pub. So, yeah, you get, I think the life I had, and then obviously working this first part of my formative professional, as you would say, career in management in hospitality was in pubs. So, I spent a lot of time with my landlords and ladies, speaking to them. They lived above the pub, so the pub was their life. So I talked to them about business, but about life. I talked to them about their customers. I got to know the customers, good and bad, positive and negative experiences. And, So, I've always worked with people in all walks of life. And of course, now I'm in Dubai, where we're an absolute melting pot of cultures and people from all over the world. So I suppose it's a comfortable environment for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that if I want to discuss your current title now and what you do, and it's a big responsibility, it's a big job. Hilton being voted the #1 best place to work
In the world.
in the world, you know,
and a hospitality business.
So from a chef's perspective, you know, and for people who don't really understand, what is your sort of key jobs? Because you're not just looking after a little place.
No.
Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
Yeah, it's a big part of the world.
It's a big part of the world.
Yeah.
How do you start strategizing about food and beverage operations in different continents where these markets are all sort of very different to each other almost?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, because of my upbringing, I think I have a healthy respect to how myself and my team, we always say food is what connects us but sets us apart. And people often say, well, what do you mean about that? And I said, well, we come together to celebrate, you know, or eat together, to be together, you know, as families, friends. It connects us, but it always sets us apart because food is intrinsic. It's in the culture. It's born of what comes from the produce and the land and the taste. So I say food connects us, but it also separates us because food is part of our cultural identity. So you're absolutely right. It is a big. So just over 5.5 years ago, I was approached to join Hilton. I think I was very fortunate because it's a huge scale role. I'd done national roles before and international roles in the Middle East, but this was of a different scale. And it's like, you know, even when I was going through the process and I spoke to Hilton for a year, I think both of us were just making sure it was the right move because they really wanted to get this appointment right. And I really didn't want to move from a role into this role and it not be right. So we actually spoke for a year. It was a really considered decision. But one of the things was I was so used because I'm, you know, I've been an operator most of my life and then progressed through the ranks. But, you know, I think I'm good and successful in this business, you know, because I am absolutely relentless and in the detail. But as you progress in your career, you start to realize that actually you're not paid so much for how much you do. And, you know, I did 5,000 tasks today, or I'm so busy, you know, I did 37 emails, attended this many meetings. And, you know, I think Jeff Bezos says it the best. He says, I'm actually paid for the quality of my decisions. So I realized that actually this was going to be a role that I couldn't be in the detail. You know, I wouldn't be making the final decision on OS&E because, you know, we open hundreds of restaurants and bars. You know, I wouldn't be deciding on the uniform, you know, which was initially at the beginning was quite, you know, wow. I was so, you know, sometimes we'd open hotels and I'd never even been to the country, you know. So you're absolutely right. It's like, how do you scale up to a role like that? So Hilton, my title is the first thing, you know, Vice President of Strategy and Development, or Development and Strategy for Food and Beverage, or as I like to say, Food and Drink for Hilton. And it's like, I was kind of like, what does this even mean, you know? And it wasn't until I got into Hilton that I understood what the title meant. And they never gave me a job description. Can you imagine a role as big as this? And I kept saying in this year's discourse, the job description, and they were like, and, you know, for a company that is incredibly commercial, successful and process-driven, they were so engaged in making the right appointment. You know, they said, obviously there's going to be parameters and, you know, we have due diligence and process and, you know, we have our values and our visions and, you know, we have our ways of working. But they said, we want you to come in and create your role and tell us what we need to do to, reach the vision of, being a world-class food and drink global hospitality operator. So my first 6 months was spent traveling a lot of countries all over Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and indeed the UK, and meeting people, meeting owners, hotels, going out in the business, seeing the competitive landscape. And I created a strategy of how we would start to pull this business together as a food and drink business. And, we're talking over 1,000 restaurants and bars, and a very big P&L. And a lot, I think at the time there was 16,000 Hilton team members working in EMEA food and drink. Obviously, we keep growing. So I created a 64-page strategy, and it was approved, and we started. And then COVID came. I joined in the 19, did all this work in 19, presented it, got it approved by the exec, got my budget approved. January 20, right, here we go. February, COVID started. I was in Amsterdam at the Global Restaurant Investment Forum. We all got on a flight back to Dubai, and then that was it. And then I spent the rest of that year supporting the business through the lockdowns. And of course, everybody remembers the lockdown in Dubai, 4 weeks, so successful. But, we had businesses in Europe, Africa. I had businesses all over the world that were feeling a different impact of lockdown. So we really started proper 21. But the strategy is now that 64-page document is on one piece of paper. And that strategy stood us well. And it doesn't cover everything, but we have 5 guiding principles, which is, people, product, performance, places, purpose. I literally live by that. And we have 3 pillars. And the base pillar is about creating core processes and products to support the overall business. So that's programs and prototypes and systems and processes that can go across a big range of the business. The middle bit was rediscovering our culture, internal and external narrative, and having the right partnerships. So how we got the business to talk really positively about food and drink internally and externally, and how we brought the right partners in. And the top part of the strategy was about reigniting our mojo. And that was like, creating the best restaurants and bars. And, out of 1,000 restaurants and bars, we have a laser focused 30 or so that we invest a lot of time and energy in, because they, they're the best. Michelin stars, World's 50 Best, Gourmillio, La Liste. Those are the ones we aspire to be representative of how we're as good as the best, and also are step changing our perceptions in PR and marketing. So we have a vision, which is about being, the best global hospitality operator in the sphere of food and drink, being, creating fun and engaging and delighting our customers, but also our team members, but, also delivering performance and returns for our owners and stakeholders. So, it all ladders up to that, but it's on one piece of paper, and it's what keeps us going. So it's the glue, and everything we do. So we have regional strategies, but everything ladders up to that one strategy, and it kind of is my North Star and keeps me organized, because we have a very laid out vision. We have our 5 guiding P's, and we have these 3 sort of business strategic pillars. And if it doesn't ladder to that, we don't do it, because there's too much to do. But
what I'm interested in, Emma, is also that there are, specifically for your team members, there are so many sort of key things and activities that you do for all of the teams. So, for example, there are, again, Pina Colada, I didn't know was invented by Hilton. Flavor and Flair, the Wine Club, John Bon Jovi and the Hampton Water. All of these things and you're heavily involved in these.
Yeah.
How do you and your team start to come up
Well-
with these activities? And also, it's really important to have those key, or all the team members engaged.
Yeah. So it goes back to the strategy, and it goes back to reigniting our mojo, which is the tip of the tip of the spear. Reigniting our mojo. So we had, core-based products and processes and services at the bottom of the, if you imagine a triangle of needs, core-based, and that's the real business stuff. That's
Right.
the processes, the systems, the performance reporting, the prototypes, the playbooks, the stuff that goes across a lot of countries, a lot of regions, a lot of business. The middle bit was about, rediscovering our culture. So that's the people bit, the retail talent, the partnerships, the internal and external positive narrative about we can do this, because obviously hotels have got to a space where they just were, food and drink's too hard, it's too difficult to make money, we lose money, it's a necessary evil, it's amenity to be provisioned, but let's do as little as we can, and make as much money as we can, and just kind of it has to be done to actually we can be good at food and drink. And I want to talk at some point about how customers and taste tourism and food and drink and chefs being, rock stars is kind of like driven that agenda as well. And also, so the tip of the spear, reigniting our mojo. So it was about the narrative, about how we portray, Hilton EMEA Food and Drink as a cool place to work, how people, our customers and the industry perceived us as like not stuffy old, just, lobby lounge operators or in-room dining operators. And it's like when you don't have a lot of time and you don't have a lot of resources and, it's like, how do you do it? So obviously Instagram, and I don't have the time or resources to do TikTok because, that's just a full-time thing. But so it was like, right, we create an Instagram account and, how do you create an Instagram account that covers, 70 odd countries? I don't know how many languages. At the time, I think it was 16, but growing Hilton brands. We have more than that representing in EMEA now. And goodness knows how many hundreds and hundreds of different restaurant and bar brands. And we said, well, Hilton is the flagship brand. It's the company names, and taste is so synonymous with food and drink. So we called it Taste of Hilton. And obviously at the beginning, I got a lot of pushback. Well, luxury, we don't want to be on there because we're luxury and we don't want to be assigned with the full service brand and everything. And we made the content, and we started to get better. And because we started, it's not a big budget account, we realised that actually it's user-generated content. So if it's actually reposting content from the team members and the chefs and the sommeliers and the baristas, but also from customers and from local initiatives, it would resonate. And slowly, it was just creating FOMO. It was like, they started to see, they wanted to be on Taste of Hilton because we started to, team member promise, we started to showcase our talent, and all of a sudden you could have a spotlight on you. And we started to share more and more. And, obviously I talked about it and badgered and nagged everybody into it. And we started to grow. And we wanted, to create great activations for our team members, but also celebrate Hilton's legacy in part, drive commercial performance, but also position us with our partners and our brands that actually we are fun, we are engaging, we are relevant, we're prepared to push the envelope a bit. So, for example, we did the pina colada competition, and it just was, Hilton created the pina colada. It's 70 years old this year. People didn't really realise it. Customers say it represents a holiday in a glass. It's still one of the most popular cocktails on holiday. And It's 70 years. So we worked on the first ever global activation, and everybody's like, kind of, this is a bit hard work. But, you know, we got 270 team members submit recipes. We partnered with the rum brand, and we finally narrowed it down. You know, and we took 17 members to the Hilton Caribe in Puerto Rico, the founding hotel, and we had an amazing 3 days with them. And, you know, we crowned Matteo from Hilton Park Lane as the champion, and, you know, we rolled his drink out across EMEA. But it's just about, you know, that's been a 5-year journey to get people engaged around doing stuff like that. But the other thing is you talked about the John Bon Jovi and the Hampton Water. Well, one of the programs I started was called Uncorking Potential 2 years ago with my team. And we realised that wine was such an untapped resource for us, you know. I sell, well, at the time, 2 or 3 years ago, in my managed estate, we were selling north of, you know, $65 million of wine a year. And it was almost by mistake. So, you know, because we then, you know, we put a program together with Helen McGinn, that a lot of people know as Knackered Mother, famous, and on Saturday Morning Kitchen in the UK, because we brainstormed and I said, I want to make wine accessible. You know, I want to make it accessible for team members, where culturally a lot of team members would never drink wine, or wine's not in their culture as a drink to enjoy with food, or they don't have access to wine. They've never had the opportunity to taste wine. So how do we break it down from this really highly educated, highbrow, snooty, closed shop to make it accessible for all, but also for customers? So we created Uncorking Potential, and that's why we chose Helen, because she makes wine really simple and really accessible. So we did lots of videos with her. We identified our best sommeliers, and then we started to work with great partnerships. You know, we signed some great vintners. We signed for the first time with LVMH for Hilton. But part of that program is, you know, one thing I do is I recognize that food and drink and pop culture, you know, chefs are the new rock stars, as I always say. And we know that, what is it, 1 in 5 every social media post is about eating or drinking. So we work with Gerard Bertrand in France, who's an incredible winemaker. He has 17 vineyards. He's highly acclaimed. And we tasted his rosé, Hampton Water. And we found out that John Bon Jovi and Jesse Bon Jovi had bought this vineyard because Jesse had become, he wanted to be a winemaker, and he trained and everything. And we partnered with Gerard, and then we partnered with John, and and Jesse, and we supported them in London. And you know, we worked with them so well, and we now stock Hampton Water in a large part of our estate where it's accessible. And you know, I hope to make some exciting announcements soon about Dubai. But we're very fortunate because of our partnerships and our scale. We can do things at impact. So, you know, in the last year, I've had team members go to Brazil with one of our coffee suppliers. I've had team members go to Sweden on money can't buy trips, you know, like curated, going to really remote places in really small little planes. They've gone with a spirit supplier to a really remote, beautiful place in Sweden. I've had team members a couple of years ago go on a curated trip with a premium tequila brand to Mexico. And, you know, team members, every year we send team members to Champagne in France. I've sent team members to the Black Forest with a really boutique gin brand, a German gin brand. And we always try and reward and recognise people. Our chefs, you know, go on. Are we constantly encouraging our hotels to send chefs on supplier visits to farms, to markets? And what we've started to do is capture this content and share it. Mm. And it's interesting now, more and more people want to join my team and join our team and join Hilton. I mean, of course, they want to join Hilton because we go back to great places to work, and it's a great company and it's built on its culture. And but when you want a career in food and drink, and all of a sudden you see somebody in hospitality that you think might be a bit stuffy, you know, and they're doing all this cool stuff. Okay, there's a lot of hard yards in hospitality and food and drink, and we know that, and nobody's getting away from that. But if you can work for a company that has very strong team member promise, work ethic, you know, we've got great values, a company built on culture, a company that cares, is recognised by so many accolades about caring and diversity and inclusion, you know, millennial employer of choice in the US, single mums employer of choice, you know, it's just, and then you layer on some of the stuff that we do, and you see it in Taste of Hilton, some of our programs and our training, and then you layer on what we're trying to do around some of our repositioning of food and drink, and then you layer on some of the partners that we're working with, some of the great restaurants and brands and chefs we work with, all of a sudden we become quite a attractive proposition for somebody aspiring to make a career in food and drink.
That's what I was going to say, Emma, because look, if you certainly in my career working within hotels, now I come from two ends of the spectrum. So number one, restaurants and Michelin-starred restaurants. At the same time, I've worked in luxury 5-star resorts across the region, and a lot of hotels don't seem to get it right when it comes to the dining piece or the chefs and that sort of thing. But across the board with Hilton generally, you have some phenomenal chefs and, as you said, Michelin-starred restaurants, especially in the luxury sector. So, you know, you have people like Sally Abbey, for example, you know, Heinz Beck, people like this. It must be quite astounding to work with these types of people.
It is, you know, and our team members, you know, we work with some top chefs, you know. If I name, you know, obviously you've mentioned Heinz Beck, Gordon Ramsay. He's just been at our Waldorf Astoria in Versailles, Trianon Palace, at the Gordon Ramsay restaurant there. In fact, last night, you know, with the team. We work with Dean Banks. We work with, you know, Sydney Chute in Amsterdam. We work with so many great chefs. We've got currently, you know, 10 Michelin stars in Europe. Now, I know there's other big hotel groups that are doing the same, but I have a part of my team where we have somebody who's 100% full-time focused on partnerships, and that can be leasing, franchising, manchising, consultancies. So, and in part of our strategy, we have a partnership pop-up consultancy type arrangement. So we also work with brands on short-term arrangements, like, you know, coming into beach clubs for the summer, or working with chefs, you know, and you know, we did a couple of years ago, we did a piece of work in London with Asma Khan, for example. You know, we recently did, and I hope to do more work with her, but you know, we recently worked with Romy Gill, where she kindly, you know, did a call with some of our women chefs and talked about how, you know, she got to where she is in the world, you know. So I constantly like have to pinch myself of, because we're a global operator and because we have scale and we have impact, and, you know, I have restaurant managers that have the most incredible contacts, you know, through their career. And through that, we can get introductions pretty much through our impact and scale, or through our team members who've worked with these people. You know, one of my team, you know, worked with Alan Ducasse. You know, somehow we're often only just 2 phone calls away from speaking to the right person, which is brilliant and a huge opportunity. And we try and bring that, you know, for the benefit of our guests, by bringing great activations to our hotel, for the benefit of our team members to have those wow, pinch me moments, or those experiences, or those learning and development opportunities, or for those opportunities to hear from industry greats. and, you know, to shine a commercial spotlight on our hotels, that actually we are out there with the cool cats. We are out there, you know, we're not stuck in this fortress of a hotel, kind of lost in our compendiums of menus, you know, and churning out the same old stuff. We are, you know, anybody listening, I've got, you know, myself and my team, we've got a long way to go. We've got a lot of work to do. But I think in the last 5 years, we've made a lot of ground. And, you know, I want to thank my team for that, and thank Hilton for supporting me, because it's a big old machine. Somebody said something once to me about working in Hilton, and it was my boss actually. He said, of course things get signed off. Of course there's processes, but sometimes when you want to make stuff happen, it's so big and there's so many stakeholders, and, you know, nothing can happen as fast as like in an independent world. But my team, we work pretty fast within the corporate machine. But he said, it's about getting enough people nodding. And when you get enough people behind you, it's sometimes really hard to get initiatives off the ground, or I'm always breaking the mold. My team's always breaking the mold. But once you get that flywheel going, and I think over the last few years, my team is really, and that flywheel is going like a little hamster wheel.
Yeah, I was going to say, look, because the other, there's two sort of key things I want to discuss with you. First of all, it's, you know, Hilton is a large brand. EMEA is a huge place. When it comes to the sustainability piece with what Hilton are doing, there have been rather a large number of initiatives that you have been carrying out as a brand and as a team.
Yeah.
For people who don't know, what are you doing?
Well, you know, I go back to that year's discourse I had talking to Hilton about whether to join them. And in all honesty, two of the deciding factors were, because you only know so much, you know, was their people culture. And I looked a lot into that because, you know, I've worked in some tough gigs in hospitality over my career. And, you know, I'm at that stage now where I want to do some stuff and give back. And I want to work in a nice environment. You know, I mean, you're only on this earth once, and, you know, I've kind of done some tough gigs. So I really looked into the people element of the culture. And, you know, everybody knows me in this region way back in 2015 when I was on the bandwagon of ditching single-use plastic. You know, way back then, you know, I think I was one of the pioneers of you know, slurp, don't suck type thing with straws, as was our campaign at the time. And I looked into their ESG credentials, and Hilton's ESG strategy is what we call travel with purpose. And I researched it, and it really is entrenched in the organisation. And it comes from the fact that we are a people purpose-led organisation, because the founder, Conrad Hilton, you know, was such a visionary. The whole principle of the business is still founded on Conrad's Hilton, a vision of hospitality, that we have a responsibility to fill the earth with the light and warmth of hospitality. And what does that translate as? That translates as responsible tourism. That translates as having targets to hire, you know, refugees. That translates as targets to hire people in disadvantaged situations, to sponsor people through the Hilton Foundation, to lend aid in areas of crisis. You know, it translates in responsibilities of every hotel having to record their ESG activities, be it, you know, environment, social, or governance, on our award-leading platform, Lightstay, which is transparent to guests. You know, it translates to us being the first hospitality business to sign up to the Paris Agreement, to have science-based goals of carbon reduction in our business. Yes, we aspire to net zero, but our president and CEO said we don't quite know where that is at the moment, but we have science-backed specific targets, which from memory serves me right, is 76% reduction in our managed estate. So, and we have a percentage reduction in our franchise estate. So we have science-backed goals, and we have a road path to get to those. So, and so it really is really, we know, and all our research shows that customers and employees are more engaged, want to spend time and their money in businesses that have a genuine ESG strategy and is trying to do good.
And what is ESG for people who don't know?
Environment, social, and governance. So, travel with purpose and we have an overarching strategy, and we naturally have key principles and pillars that we look to work on, be it energy reduction, carbon reduction, how we build our hotels, looking at lighting, water usage, how we give back to communities. And the hotels do a lot of community activations. We're all targeted on volunteer hours a year, even corporate people. So, and obviously we have huge diversity, equity and inclusion, which sits under the social side of environment, social and governance. So I very much, through food and drink, saw what our key pillars were, our key targets, and it was around local sourcing and supporting waste reduction. So around our diversity, equity and inclusion. So I leaned into those three things, and we have a very, very robust local sourcing strategy where we work with our supply chain now, and in all countries we try and encourage local sourcing, but like anything, I'm an old school operator, what gets measured gets done. And we are now pioneering in Hilton a part of our supply chain system where our suppliers can place country of origin on every product that comes in, and it's quite an intensive project, but we're now at 10 countries as in this year, where we now know exactly the percentage of sourcing that is coming in locally in that country. So in the UAE, for example, in the last couple of years we've gone from 0 to 29%.
Which is huge.
It's huge. In the UK, we're at around 64%.
Wow.
In the Netherlands, we're around 64%. We've got some countries that we know are nearly 100% because of import duties, importation and inflation. But that we're actually not we're not logging them at the moment because we know that that's the case. But each year I'm adding more and more. And so it's statistically science back, it's the data is there, we can see. So, and of course we encourage local, and how we encourage local is we have things like through our conference and banqueting, or what we call group meeting and events business. We offer things like the 50-mile menu. We offer opportunities for guests to give back, offset their carbon footprint through various ESG initiatives. And then the other part we looked at is wastage, and Hilton has a target to reduce our waste by 50% by 2030. So food waste, as we know, is a huge problem for the environment in terms of, we know that food waste contributes the most dangerous methane, some of the most dangerous greenhouse gases by how the organic produce rots. And every hotel, it is a brand standard for every hotel to record organic waste, but also to have a food waste strategy. But what we did is we really, really dialed that up in our region. And I'm really fortunate to, with the team and the partnership we've had, that we now have, over, I think it's 200 and something hotels now in the managed estate that have a Winnow AI system in, where we work on actually forensically measuring our food waste. We have lots of great initiatives, and we've done some really amazing work with partners such as NAMA here in the UAE and United Nations Environment Programme. And, we piloted in 2023 Green Ramadan, which, we did in 3 countries across 3 hotels, and we achieved a 64% reduction in our food waste in 30 days from baseline on day 1 of the iftar buffet to
Wow.
the end of Ramadan. We then did Green Ramadan last year, 24, applying the same principle And everything is data recorded, every element of that Green Ramadan process from sourcing right down to what goes into landfill and the whole circle there. And we did it in 7 countries. I think it was across 32 hotels, including Asia Pacific joined me, Malaysia, going back to the original story. We had 2 hotels from Kuala Lumpur join us, and we achieved another 21% reduction on our baseline exit on those 3 hotels. So what we baselined at the end of Ramadan on our grams per cover wastage in 23, in those 32 hotels across 7 countries, we took another 21% off baseline. And what it showed us was it's much tougher to scale something that's so detailed. But, we were very strict. That's why we only took 2 on from Asia Pacific, because we wanted to make sure that they had the full system, they had the winnow system, they were trained on the... Now, we'll scale Green Ramadan further in 25. But in between that, we were so... overjoyed with the results of Green Ramadan 23 that obviously we had COP28 last year in Dubai, and in the August we launched Green Breakfast, because we know that breakfast is one of the unifying meals for hotels globally, and we know it's a huge potential for food waste, and it's an area that has to be tackled. And we know that breakfast is so important, and people love that breakfast experience when they go to a hotel. They really treat themselves. It's like, people enjoy really kind of almost overindulging at breakfast, or just having that choice of having whatever they want, and not having to prepare it and going back and enjoy it. So we applied all the same principles of a buffet. How we presented, the team members, what we cooked a la menu, how we reused, how we disposed of the food, how we recorded it, how we took actions against some of the data that came out of the winnow machines. And in 13 weeks, from August to the December of COP28, we reduced food waste in 13 hotels in breakfast by 62%.
That's extraordinary.
In 13 weeks. And I was so honoured that the United Nations invited myself and Sebastian Nose and Nikki on our team to attend COP28 and go to the Blue Zone and actually talk with the United Nations about Green Ramadan and Green Breakfast, because they were one of our partners, and we're obviously checking all our data, checking all our results. And it was the first time Hilton went to a COP, and we were very honoured that our global vice president of ESG flew over from the US and joined us at COP28, because this was kind of a big deal. This was the first time we'd attended a COP. Wow. And it was on the back of the work of our team.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Because I think that's phenomenal. And I was thinking, as you were talking, it's almost as if Hilton is a role model for hotels globally for the sustainability piece. But then it also brings me, Emma, onto the fact that you yourself are a role model, because you've had numerous accolades throughout the years.
Thank you.
Because the one thing that you're also pushing, which I think is actually incredible, and it should have been done a long time ago, is attracting female chefs into the industry, specifically in kitchens, because as we know, it's an incredibly robust place to work. It's not easy at times, but what you're doing in Hilton is, for me, I think, going to change the landscape completely.
I hope so.
Can you just explain to me as to why this is so important to you?
Well, okay. I'm of an age that I've done some hard yards. It hasn't, and I'm no little violins out, but it hasn't been an easy path to get here. We talked about resilience and how I learnt resilience young in my childhood. It's a good job, because I would not have survived pubs and clubs and hospitality otherwise.
Right.
And there are a lot of successful women chefs out there who have had to do some hard yards to get to executive chef positions. We know that the world's top restaurants are helmed by 6% women. It's massively. I mean, we talk about gender gap, we talk about diversity and equity, and lots of industries have their challenges, but, and I'm not an expert in all those industries, but culinary across the world in, all kitchens, global hospitality operators or independents or small single source, everybody is struggling to, achieve gender balance in their kitchens. As a rule, we do know there's exceptions, and I have some exceptions where we've even got hotels that are now 54% women in culinary,
which is
incredible. And we'll talk about that. But one of the reasons we get back to, I joined Hilton, and I do think Hilton is, it's an incredible organisation, built on culture, performance, incredible, but led by purpose, and our CEO always talks about our bank of culture, and how in tough times we leaned into it in COVID, and in good times we build up on it again, because, and it takes people to create that culture. But, we have our founder's vision. But, one of the reasons I joined Hilton, and I said I wanted to work in a nice place, but I wanted to work in a nice place where I would have a platform to make impact, and I'm very fortunate, as my team are, that when we get behind something, and it's not easy, and you have to scramble eggs, you have to break eggs, and sometimes you have to get all those people nodding, and that's sometimes really difficult because everybody's busy and everybody wants to do the best thing, but everybody's got a day job. And then you layer in a project that's on top, like the Hilton Chefs Inclusion Programme, and I have colleagues from operations, from culinary, from learning and development, from comps and bends, from recruitment, and they're all working on this project with me on top of their day jobs. But basically, a few years ago, Hotelier Middle East published the Power 50, and it was absolutely, a few years ago, the first time that everybody went up in arms about the fact that it was all men. And I was like, well, it's been all men for a long time, but, at least the conversation started. And I gave an interview to the editor, and I was like, he published it, and it was like, kind of like, the industry needs to stop shouting at the publication, don't shoot the messenger. These are the industry's nominations. These are your chefs. These are what's representing the industry. And this is exactly where we are on gender equity and inclusion in our kitchens.
Yeah.
But what I did was, and it was sprung just from a moment of passion and speaking about it, was I said, but I'm going to do something about it. And of course, later I thought, right, I've got all this stuff going on. This was maybe 2 years ago. I'm doing all this stuff with local. I'm doing all this stuff with waste. I'm doing all this stuff in my strategy. I'm still, we've still got hotels coming out the ground. We've got, every year we have our busiest pipeline. I still got team that I need to stabilize, recruit, fill in gaps, fight for budget. And I'm like, right, I'm going to start this work stream. And I can lean into, Hilton's got so many great tools around role modeling and coaching and all this, but I'm like, I engaged inclusion in, and I did a piece of research where we anonymously surveyed. We had about 1,000 women chefs in my kitchen at the time. We got 846 responses.
Wow.
That's how strongly people felt about it.
Wow.
From an anonymous survey to basically, we didn't have email addresses for half these chefs. We had to get we had to get them to come. We had to get the exec chef to get their personal email address. I mean, it was really hard work. Now, the results were pretty good, really, but there was huge areas of opportunity, and it was around being a carer or a career. And I said, it's literally down to one vowel, an E. It was around flexibility. It was around, did you go on the smoke breaks with the exec chef? There was so much stuff that came out of that. But basically, it set up these 5 work streams around communications and marketing, awareness of the opportunities, around L&D, around recruitment, and around basically, all these different initiatives we could do. And in year 1, I suppose our biggest success was launching the programme, but actually getting into the kitchens and the exec chefs and saying, look, you have to start taking this seriously. And in the first year, we have a coaching program in Hilton, and we had 109% uptake on women chefs signing up to that coaching program. And we didn't even have enough coaches. And this year we're working on flexibility, we're working on exec chef development program, but, you know, we have agreed recruitment targets as well. You know, I have now got targets that sit with me and my team and our recruitment where we are trying to drive female recruitment targets. And, you know, this might sound a bit almost, you know, pro towards women, but I'm still below 10% of my executive chefs are women. You know, we've got a long way to go. This isn't going to be fixed in my lifetime, but we've got a series of work initiatives going. But I think our chef program and highlighting our sheroes and our chefs, as we call them, and actually starting to, again, through Taste of Hilton and through our own personal platforms, you know, show that we are very serious about developing women talent in culinary, because we know that, you know, if you can see it, you can be it. So we have to champion, and, you know, we're not just championing exec chefs, exec sous, junior sous, chef de parties, you know, because the data showed that at entry level, we bring in about 20% women. But by the time they get to chef de partie, which is kind of first supervisory level, that percentage of women drops to 11. So we almost halve. And then as you go up the ranks, it dwindles away to that 6-7% at the top. And so we've identified our top 20 talent at the moment. Bearing in mind, we've got thousands and that, you know, we've probably got about 6,000 chefs in my team. We've identified 20 women that we think can shoot for exec chef. And, you know, Sebastian knows, who's our senior director of culinary, has a main line into those 20 women. Now, that might sound a bit elitist, but you have to start somewhere. You know, got about 6,000 chefs, all in different countries, on different systems, speaking different languages. You've got to start somewhere. Imagine if I get those 20, or my team get those 20 to executive chef. You know, I've got 7. I've got 7 at the moment.
That will drive is phenomenal.
You know, and we know that, you know, organisations that have senior women in leadership go on to have, you know, a lot more women in senior to middle management. We know that women who have a senior woman as a role model are 25% more likely to achieve senior leadership roles themselves. So it's about mentorship. And again, I'm fortunate I can lean into Hilton and our diversity and equity and inclusion framework, of which is so robust. You know, we have women team member resource groups, we have D&I training, we have gender bias training, we have, you know, unconscious bias training. It's a great culture. You know, it's a culture built on everybody bringing their authentic self to work. I mean, I'm KPI'd on these, you know. My team every year is anonymously surveyed, you know, do I feel like I can bring my authentic self to work? Can I be myself at work? You know, do I have access to development roles? You know, am I free to talk about my mental health? You know, am I free to talk about without negative consequences? You know, I'm KPI'd against all these every year, as is every person in people management in Hilton. So it goes right into the business. So I can lean into that framework. But what we're doing through Hilton Chef Inclusion Programme is doing more, because even my boss and our senior vice president of human resources is like supporting me. I mean, obviously you have to work within the framework, but we're trying to break it a little bit and be a bit more edgy and create new programs and create more compelling content to make people realise that actually there is opportunities in Hilton for women chefs. Because if we carry on doing what we're doing, we're going to get the same results. And we're a long way off gender parity in kitchens. So yeah. It's a real passion project, but, you know, this is why, you know, I'm not, I'm not in the cool cat entrepreneurial world, or, maybe running the coolest restaurants and bars in the world, or, but I'm in a place where we have a big platform. We have a big opportunity to create impact. We have responsibility for a lot of stakeholder investment, so we have to be wise with it. But we also have responsibility for a lot of team members' careers. And, we can build people's careers. We can build people's aspirations and dreams. We make people's holidays. We can give our team members incredible experiences. I get to share with them. And in all honesty, I have so much fun doing what I'm doing that, and the fun never stops. I can't even. I was looking at my diary to the end of the year.
I was going to say.
And the nonsense that I mean, if you knew some of the stuff I'm going to do between now and December, the countries I'm going to go to, the people I'm going to meet, the stuff I'm going to get to do, it's an absolute honour and a privilege. And the biggest honour and privilege is the team around me, because they make it happen. I'm allowed to do what I do. I get the headspace to get back to the point. I always thought you had to be the hardest worker, the biggest grafter, work the longest hours, which you do in hospitality. But I now have the headspace and the room to come up with the next way we're going to do things, or the next vision, or the next idea, or because my team just are so competent, and I'm really blessed to have such a great team around me, and they're all highly experienced. So it's a real blessing, this role, and I hope to be able to make a bit more impact for a bit longer.
So now, Emma, we have come to the quick fire questions.
I'm a bit scared.
So I've tried to make them as easy and as gentle for you as possible. All right. So first things first, I think I know. Are you sweet or salty?
Both.
Both. Pickled or spicy?
Spicy.
Pie and chips or fish and chips?
Fish and chips.
Sunday roast or full English?
Sunday roast.
So right now,
Yeah.
what would you say are your top 3 cuisines that you love to eat?
Oh, gosh. Well, anything Southeast Asian and spicy.
So I'm going to count that as a 1.
As one, yeah,
Right.
definitely from that triangle. Levant.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, I would replace Levant / Moroccan, because when I've just recently come back from Morocco, and I'm so blown away by that cuisine.
Oh, amazing.
I'm sad to say I thought it was very much more similar to Levant, but Moroccan cuisine has its own identity, and it's incredible. And Gordon Ramsay's classed it as one of the best cuisines in the world, and I now get why, having been in Morocco. So 1 Southeast Asian, 2 Moroccan, and 3, you can't beat a good pasta. I love pasta.
The simplicity of pasta as well.
Yeah.
So who would you say are your top 3 culinary heroes? And they don't necessarily need to be chefs.
Culinary heroes that don't necessarily need to be chefs. 1, my husband, because he does all the cooking.
What a legend.
Because I'm always late, and I've always been travelling. And he was a stay-at-home dad, by the way. So when it wasn't cool to be a stay-at-home dad a long time ago. So 1, my husband. 2, Chef Sebastian Nos, our culinary director. He is amazing. He's strategic. He's a leader of men and women, and he just makes things happen and moves mountains. So my husband, Chef Sebastian Nos, and then probably Asma Khan for everything she's doing to advance women in culinary and her story. And she's just incredible.
Now, from all of your years within the hospitality industry, there are lots of things that happen. But what would you say has been your funniest ever either kitchen incident that you've witnessed or restaurant incident?
Okay. Well, I've got a lot, and a lot that can't be shared. But I will share them in a book one day, anonymously. But Anybody who knows me well will giggle at this. So I talked about being a student and working, and I needed to work because I needed the money, because we talked about that as well. But I did go and work for a big global chain, and on my first shift, they gave me a brown pair of sort of polyester, really bad trousers to wear as the uniform, and everybody had to wear them, and a really bad shirt, but the trousers. And I remember the feel and the look and how uncomfortable they were during shift, and it's kind of shaped why I care about people's uniforms, really. So I literally did one shift, and then after shift I took these trousers off, folded them up, and went to the duty manager, and probably was a bit cheeky. I said, look, I need a job, but I don't need a job bad enough to wear these trousers. And anybody who knows me, especially my team, it's like what I wear is really important to me. So as a broke student, and I'd have made good money in that job, and they had more hours than they cared. I would never have been short to work, but I was like, no, not wearing them trousers.
There is a huge
They
moral
looked hideous.
story, yes.
They felt hideous, and they made me feel hideous at work, which is why I'm always conscious when I see, especially team members in the summer heat of the Dubai, wearing completely inappropriate clothing.
Yes.
I always talk about it because, I remember that incident. You're running around and they made me sweat, and they looked awful.
No, fair enough. What advice would you give to 16-year-old Emma Banks?
Join hospitality earlier. And don't be afraid to be a woman in a man's world, and don't try and play the same game as them. And I have been bullied a lot in my career, and walked away from those situations. It would have been, don't put up with it. But hindsight's a wonderful thing, and times are very different now. Getting quite emotional thinking about that, actually.
And then finally, what advice would you give to anyone wanting to join the hospitality industry?
Do it now. It's not all glamorous, I mean, I work for Hilton. We're pretty lucky. We've got brilliant back of house standards. We really care about team member welfare. Our restaurants are great. We try and ensure we give nutritious team member food. We have great, but do it now. Hospitality, if you work hard, you give your guests a great experience. You get to travel the world, you get to meet lots of people, and there's no barriers to progression in hospitality. There's lots of people in hospitality who progressed. They didn't have to have the right university education. You can learn language skills. If you're talented, you will develop, you will be given access to develop your language skills. So, 16-year-olds, definitely, if you want to join hospitality, don't wait around.
Now, Emma, if anybody wanted to get hold of you through social media, what's the best way that they can do that?
Follow me on LinkedIn, or try and connect with me on LinkedIn. I've got Instagram as well at Lady Banks, and I genuinely do try and respond to them all. I mean, I do get a lot of reach out on LinkedIn, especially from women. I get a lot. I'm going to be speaking to a young lady from a hospitality school in Europe, I think, next week. No, she's been trying to pin me down for a couple of months for a meeting, and she wants some career advice. I don't know who she is. I'll probably never meet her, but I do try my best to respond on LinkedIn. The problem with LinkedIn, lots of the problem with LinkedIn is I have to sift through the people that just say, check my profile, do you have a job? I mean, but the ones that say, introduce themselves, say why they want to talk to me, or why they want me to message them back, or, what they want some advice on that I can just message back, I probably spend an hour a day on my LinkedIn. responding to comments, responding to people, asking Jen, who helps me with my life, to set up meetings. And, you know, I probably do speak to people and write to people that I'll never meet. So LinkedIn is the best, I think. But I'm also, what's really nice on Instagram is again, you know, I get a lot of women chefs. The most moving one, I sent it to Nikki on my team, who massively supports me with Hilton Chef Inclusion Programme, and she's a huge advocate for women in leadership, and she does a lot of great work, and she's an inspiration in herself. A woman wrote to me once, and she said, I was in hospitality a long time ago, and I was a woman chef, and I left and pursued another career. And she said that culinary was my passion. And she said, if you had been in charge, I would have still been a chef. She said, you made my chef self of a long time ago be seen. And I was so moved by that. I screenshot it, I sent it to Nikki, and I said, if I'm doing that for one lady in Turkey or Russia or in Africa, you know, in all the countries that, you know, and I have actually, through the work we do now on the Hilton Chefs Inclusion Programme, we've had people reach out to us that's also needed some help, and we've been able to do that as well. It's not all roses in the garden, you know, so if I can help people that need a little bit of support, or we can, and I don't do it, you know, I just reach out to the right people in our team, you know, it's not, and it's lovely now when I go to hotels now, I don't even have to ask the hotel, the general managers are so supportive. They set up a session for me to sit and talk and meet all the women chefs and women in food and drink that aspire. And often I have to do it with a translator. You know, in Turkey recently, you know, I have to do it with somebody who helps me translate into Turkish, or, you know, in Morocco, translate into French, because I'm totally rubbish being a typical English person. I'm, you know, not bilingual. I said I spoke Bahasa Melayu when I was little, but, you know, so I'm embarrassed to say, but, you know, I always try Saudi. You know, I'm going to Saudi next week, you know, in Hilton Riyadh. Last time I was there, we were at 34% women chefs in our kitchen. So I'm really proud of the work that Chef Bilal's doing and Ellie's doing in Saudi to promote women in hospitality.
So, Emma, I just wanted to sort of recap our conversation, because it's been extraordinary and really amazing. From your childhood memories, which I had no idea of. And I love the fact that also you got stuck into the chilies at a super young age.
And the ikan bilis.
Yeah.
Salt and spice and soya sauce.
To then working at 11 years old as a waitress, I mean, I think it's amazing.
With the doily on my head.
With the doily on your head. To then, of course, university life, which sort of also led you down the path of hospitality.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, the move to the Middle East.
Yeah.
And then
to Kuwait first.
To Kuwait, of course. And then, you know, now that you're in this incredible job, an incredibly responsible job with Hilton. And as you said, Sebastian is moving mountains, but I think you're moving even bigger mountains. There is so much to take away from this conversation. You know, the entire impact of what you're doing is amazing. On behalf of the Chef JKP podcast, I want to say thank you so much for coming in, taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to be here, and at the
same time, which is a first.
And also, please do not stop inspiring all of us within the realms of hospitality, and even if you're not, your story and what you're doing and what you stand for, I think, is just incredible.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you so much. I can't wait to see what else is going to happen throughout your entire career, because it really is amazing. But thank you so much, Emma, for coming in.
Shukran and Terima Kassi.
What an inspirational conversation. Can you imagine the type of change that Emma has already implemented through the giant that is Hilton? It is remarkable that as a Hilton brand, they are making waves when it comes to sustainability, as well as attracting more females into professional kitchens. You cannot argue that Emma is one of the most senior food and beverage figures in the industry. She is so passionate about the people and the culture within the brand, but she is also super passionate about her team, which she gives credit for the projects that have already been implemented. Emma's energy is infectious. Considering her position and the amount of things that she has achieved, she is extremely humble and has time for anyone and has no ego, which is something that I really admire. I took away a lot of lessons from that conversation, specifically about hard graft and pushing the boundaries. Remember, the more that people are nodding in the room, the better your chances are of getting that idea off the ground. Thank you, Emma, for such a phenomenal chat. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to come into the studio. It was a real honor to be able to sit down with you and have this interview. It's conversations like this that can really open our minds and think about the entire ecosystem of hospitality. Doesn't matter if you're a chef, a waitress, or not even in the industry, you would have been able to take something amazing new with you today. If you want to see more of what Emma is doing, I'll place all of the details in the show notes. Don't forget that you can now watch us on YouTube. And if you haven't already, make sure to follow, share, and subscribe. I would just like to ask a small favor. If you like the show or think someone you know could learn a few lessons from the guests and the conversations we have, please share it so that we can reach as many people as possible. And who knows, perhaps these episodes can inspire someone to take action and be the very best at what they do. Finally, a big fat thanks and muchas gracias to you for staying on and listening or watching the entire show. And yes, you are a legend. Until next time, food is memories.